The Diary of Thoughts Part 10. Psychology, Sociology, and Relationships. Written by Carlos Pacheco. www.diaryofthoughts.com. I always had the opinion that psychology is a very vast field of science that leads to multiple results. Psychology applied to sociology is something even more complex, as it can lead society to be conditioned on its behaviors, as in fact these two sciences are interdependent. Psychology is nothing but the study of the human mind, a way to analyze our individuality, which stays exposed to scientific and subjective interpretations. But after all, sociology is conditioned to our feelings. Our behaviors as human beings are submitted to our minds, though everything we do contains a psychological element which allows us to analyze them. Our sociological behavior is related to our minds and generates relationships, obeying these to the principles and rules that society established to live together on a reasonable basis. Nowadays, we talk through social networks, and we use the word socialize regarding sharing our ideas and thoughts, our principles and values, revealing, even more, our different opinions, finally expressing who we are and what we feel. The old fears about being exposed to public opinion are fading away, and we gradually start opening ourselves to the world, liberating our minds. This attitude also has to do with the freedom of expression, which implies freedom of spirit, and that is a legitimate right of any one of us. Society is stepping ahead to another path of communication, where we start to analyze our psychological behaviors in an involuntary way. Everyone has a psychological profile of their own that obeys to their character and personality, which is consistently translated while relating with each other. While a teenager, I always posed the question why we are imposed on learning about subjects like religion, without being able to understand the social principles that would allow us to understand each other. In spite the fact that religion has an active social content on its messages, it could be applied and explained in a different perspective. In my opinion, shortly we'll assist to classes in school addressed to young children about relationships and the way to communicate with each other in a sane and intelligent way, the only way to minimize social conflicts while reaching their adulthood. Understanding is the key to everything, and it is extended to every area of activity, even our existence. In reality, the act of socializing is nothing but to merge a particular understanding of ourselves while being with others. Psychology works in strange ways, as every one of us is different from each other. Still, there is a basic pattern to which we all obey, and that maintains a balance while relating and communicating. Psychology can be useful, but can also become a dangerous weapon, leading to manipulate ideas for the wrong purposes. We have examples of collective manipulation of the mind, as the case of Edward Bernays, who was an expert on fields of public relations and propaganda, and which practice was adopted to promote and advertise the sale of tobacco and more in the USA. During the 1920s, psychological warfare is used to intimidate the enemy and reduce their combativeness, and sometimes it works better than any other lethal weapon that we can imagine, while it can cripple the minds of whole armies. The same effect can be inflicted in society by mass media appliance of the same methods. Everything has a psychological effect in our lives, and since the moment we are born. If we come to this dimension surrounded by tenderness and affection, we become kind and gentle, and if we face brutality and aggression, we react in the same manner. Once again, this is an example about relationships and all the feelings that are connected to it. Psychology identifies characters and personalities and tries reading our souls. Psychological effects can create illusions and dreams, generate motivations, or originate inexistent obstacles and barriers in our minds. While I was in my teens, my father took me to a psychologist to identify my potentials and at the same time to try to make an analysis about my personality. As I always had that tendency to isolate myself from other people, my father thought that I might have an individual social handicap that would hurt my future later on in life. Due to my way of thinking, I was always reluctant to be submitted to other people's judgments or analysis. I always believed that each one of us possess our intellectuality, personality, and character, and another person could never attain mostly our spirits. After some time, we finished several tests related to my intellectual capabilities, and the result was amazingly brilliant according to with the psychologist in charge. He told my father that I would be able to choose any educational field to achieve my professional future, and then he started to talk about my psychological behavior. I listened to a whole technical report about my psychological profile, And finally, I told him that it didn't help a lot as nobody would be able to understand completely the way I think. The same way that I was unable to comprehend his inner me, independently of his knowledge of psychology itself as a master degree in that field he was. At that age, I told him that he could say about some topics that might help me a little bit and for which I was thankful, but finally, I would have to find my personal reasonability and overcome my obstacles. The ones that would allow me to evolve as a human being, exactly as it happened with each one of us. At that point, he told my father that I had an adamant character, but I completely understood his role and even tried to reverse the questions which were not usual from a patient, and which he admired a lot. My father stayed very skeptical regarding my future education and mostly in what concerns our relationship, and as he never completely understood the final conclusions of that meeting, he was never able to accept my individuality. This small story behind a story is just a simple example of the practice of conventional methods applied to psychology that can be helpful in certain personal contexts, but can also damage our intrinsic personality, creating an obstacle to our evolution. Psychology is so complex that it can become a disease regarding its practice while crippling humans' minds, the reason why I consider our personal psychology in the first place. I always believed that there would be a way to identify our intellectual potential to choose an adequate profession, a way to maximize our capabilities without losing objectiveness. Instead, we're concentrating too much on other fields, but I never agreed on subjective practices of supposed sciences that tries to reshape our individuality and personality. When we left, I tried to explain my perspective to my father, and I asked him if he would like that I would tell him about my personal idea about his psychological profile. He laughed and finally understood that my individuality didn't allow any interference, and even my future would not depend on psychological analysis but exclusively on my choices. It's very clear that this is a very subjective opinion, but I would feel like a machine if I had to choose my future under the base of technical reports. My respect for individuality doesn't allow me to become a robot, independently from the existing capacities that I eventually might possess. Individuality has its own psychology, personal and unique. Later on in my life, I proved to my father that all his fears had no reason to be, in spite the fact that I followed my road, with all mistakes committed, as I also considered them as a way to correct them while personally evolving. It's very clear that we are constantly dealing with ourselves in psychological terms, and that is nothing more than to try to know our inner me and understand how we behave and react, a way to reach our individuality and accept it, finally accepting who we are. By doing this, we become able to interpret and comprehend other people's attitudes, which make everything easier regarding relationship. We all reach a level of psychological interaction that is present without our conscious awareness about it, still being applied in its structure and using our intellect. It's this exchange that allows us to relate and live together. I truly think that we are all caught within our personal psychology, which is a continuous process of our minds and gives us a notion of who we are. Psychology has its structure, and in this case, each one of them is unique and individual. Psychology as a science is nothing but to try to put a collective psychology on the place and analyze it in an intelligent way. The accumulation of knowledge brought by each individual psychology allows science to interpret our different states of mind, find merging points and those who are opposite, finally those who works as a common psychological profile and that obeys to a standard behavior to establish relationships between them. We react according to our personal psychology, and we are submitted to this reality in a certain way. Addictions are mostly caused by psychological issues that finally become habits instead of a state of dependency, as smoking, for instance. Apart from the fact that there is the physical dependence linked to smoking, this attitude became a way to relate with other people. We normally smoke after a meal or coffee, but also while having a conversation, and we do it as a gesture, an attitude that matches the habits of that social environment and allowing us to be accepted by others while practicing them. This behavior obeys more to a social practice than to a real physical dependency. In fact, our physic is submitted to our spirits that detains its individual psychology, the reason why we can also become victims of ourselves. In the majority of the cases, alcohol leads people to destroy their private and professional lives while being consumed in excess. This type of addiction is another consequence of those social habits, to which we are all exposed, still having a psychological origin. In most situations, we find ourselves escaping from a particular existing reality that affects us in a bigger or lesser scale, and this becomes a way to liberate ourselves from our personal psychology. Our personal psychology can help us but also can destroy us, depending on our will and mostly in our force of character, which has to do with our individuality. People who are influenced by others are victims of their personal psychology, as each one of we consistently practice this one. Some of us are more vulnerable than others. Therefore, they become affected by different characters and multiple states of mind. It is this interaction of personal psychologies that generates relationships, the reason why they can become so complex while apparently simple. We know that psychology is a science, but this one should explore relationships in a most accurate way as these are related to its consequences due to their interactivity. That's why relationships are so fundamental to our existence, to our social lives. If we add to it the element called feelings, we would be able to find a common platform of communication under different rules, those that are not submitted to social scientific definitions but that identify themselves with our souls. As a result of the scientific manipulation of our personal psychologies, we find ourselves at the mercy of defined criteria that pretends to be constructive, but that finally lead us to behave as mere machines, abdicating from our individual psychology. We used to say that society is like a herd of sheep, and that's true. Relationships are nothing but a platform to socialize, as they obey to a specific structure of communication between human beings, using not only certain social rules, but our minds as well. Without feelings of love and friendship, we wouldn't be able to socialize with each other in a positive way, which means that they represent a fundamental key that links our minds and our hearts to attain harmony and tranquility. Sociology establishes relationships and links feelings. Once again, we can make a certain analogy between the terms energy and logic, where feelings are present as a neutralizer to maintain the balance between both. In this different context, they are also present to establish a bridge between psychology that is nothing but a reflection of our intelligence and sociology that is an expression of relationships as a science it is. As a matter of fact, everything is related. Even ourselves are related with each other without knowing it, as all our words, actions and attitudes are reflected among us and have their fundamental influence in our daily lives. We all react according to a global sociological system to which we belong while interpreting and identifying ourselves with it. There is a fundamental relationship between everything. The whole existence is nothing but an infinitive relationship between elements, and it is this interaction that originates life herself, that reveals her complexity and uniqueness. This interaction also proves that life works as a whole mechanism with its structure, and where every element is fundamental and precious. The word socialize involves several meanings coming from an individual, though personal psychology and ending in other areas of social life as politics, for instance. The reason why there are socialists and Republicans along with other political orientations that individually match different social approaches. Once again, the important role and significance of words are present as socialism along with communism are connected with social life. The word communism implies the meaning common, which expresses a way to socialize on a basis of being treated in the same manner, though with no differences or any discrimination. Unfortunately, the practices of either socialism or communism are far away from that platform of understanding that is mentioned by both sides due to political interests. Faith is a way to socialize, along with an individual spiritual comfort that brings us together, making our social life more pleasant and easier. Sociology is a common element of every form of communication between human beings, a language that is continually practiced to attain understanding and comprehension, even acceptance of our faults and failures along with others. After all, spirituality is the most unifying platform of merging souls and sharing our faith, and there is no replacement for that reality that reigns in our hearts. The word society expresses that existing relationship that is continuously practiced between human beings and allow us to live with each other. It describes a common language that is expressed by the way we behave and communicate, and this is one primary reason to learn about the right way to socialize. Nowadays in society, it is becoming difficult to socialize, as people are absorbed and in some cases obsessed with technology and economical standards. Technology imposes a speed of reasoning that doesn't allow that we use our feelings, which is the only way to socialize, and economical standards define social status based on figures that match our bank accounts and not our individuality as unique human beings. Every science has a purpose and a final result which can be positive or negative. We can use science to evolve or to dominate society, as there is a minority of people who detain scientific knowledge. The same principle is applied to sociology as a science which reveals the responsibility of its practice. Finally, it is our awareness of this fact that will allow us to socialize with each other, using our hearts, using our feelings, and by establishing a frontier between them and all the existent definitions that might exist. In my first book, I wrote about a subject that is connected with this chapter, and which are social conflicts. As a matter of fact, this is at the origin of different states of mind that collide between themselves and due to the misunderstanding about the diversity that makes part of us all. Social conflicts are the result of a conflict between different states of mind. This conflict is also the result of the social system itself, as it submits society to its rules and all its contradictions, mainly injustices, creating obstacles between people due to their different social status. If we consider that the majority of people possess a natural gift brought by nature, namely intelligence, we can imagine the existing frustration reigning in their hearts, in their souls, by not being able to use it. It's morose to assist to people continually being evaluated and judged by their social status, namely by their bank accounts, regardless of their spirituality, their feelings. It reveals at what point society forgot about fundamental values and principles on behalf of a material world that is merely translated by figures. This evaluation is not the right way to socialize and live together in a positive social relationship. Nowadays, a common vocabulary is often used to communicate and socialize with other people who reveal the absence of values that is reigning in society. Insults became compliments, and aggression became almost an expression of reward for being a friend. There is something wrong about this social context. Let's not be astonished by the fact of assisting to youngsters killing their friends in school due to a simple argument, or by not belonging to the same local street gang, as at school they learn about everything except the way to socialize with each other. I call to this phenomenon a lack of responsibility coming from the ones that were supposed to consolidate children's social education. Street gangs are a result and a clear example of the social segregation that is practiced in society but undercover because nobody talks about it. The use of vulgar language and aggressive behaviors became even convenient to this social segregation, as if it became a state of mind or a culture, though it became accepted as a natural fact. This example is about at what level the social system can manipulate some people without noticing it. Our culture and education is based on traditions and old values and principles, the ones that made possible for us to live in a civilized society. Still, there are also the wrong ones that have to be minimized or simply abolished. The use of guns is practiced in the USA as a legitimate right of every citizen, while it originates an extremely high rate of criminality, even acts on its behalf as a way to promote it. Wrong notions about personal freedom are adopted to maintain a social context that leads society to be exposed to collective massacres at school and public places by youngsters and adults. Still, the weapon industry is jubilant about it. The social element is just not considered, as it is not convenient, period. There was this conversation that I had with someone I knew when he was telling me, quoting, "Criminality is the price that we, Americans, pay for our freedom." At that moment, I had to answer him, if it happens to you, it will be the price that you'll pay for your stupidity. In reality, when some people think that society has to be exposed to their concept of personal freedom and get ourselves or our families killed by this kind of mentality, then it means that governments have the social obligation to abolish that law and preserve our collective well-being. Politics and power are detained by a minority that gives autonomy, even creates minority groups to establish these social conflicts that extend themselves to collective massacres, still protecting a whole system that is in place. Criminality implies protection by police enforcement and by law itself. Without crime, there wouldn't be courts, judges, and lawyers. Everything is interdependent, though. I never liked politics and politicians, as they are at the origin of all wars in this world, along with religion. This whole political system went too far and reached a level where words like democracy became a pure utopia because they can't be put in practice. We assist to politicians laughing and joking within themselves while listening to legitimate social and economical issues coming from the people, and this reveals at what point of hypocrisy and cynicism our society was led to. The political system became so intense that it allows us to express ourselves but knowing at the same time that there is no turning back, though all our rights are insignificant and our will to change it became vain. Personal interests mixed with feelings of power and greed are corrupting our life in society and making it decadent little by little. Political systems should be based on social relationship and understanding about people's basic needs with a fair distribution of the wealth that is constantly created by a collective effort. This principle has nothing to do with political ideologies as socialism or communism, but with logic instead. Still, the word socialism expresses our need for oneness and brotherhood, and that is completely pulled apart by our rulers. Once again, I relate politics with sociology and psychology, which is this chapter's subject, and as they are interdependent and should be put to practice on its interactivity, which is not the case. At this point, some can tell me it is too late to change this social system we're living in, but I truly don't think so. Knowledge implies awareness, and this one should be promoted and generated in schools, since a tender age until almost adulthood. Awareness also implies rejection to everything that is not correct, which means that society depends on personal knowledge to be able to evolve in social terms. New generations will be more aware of all these social contexts, mainly about the reason why they exist. It's like talking and judging prostitution without abolishing its cause in the first place. Humanity will evolve due to understanding, though knowledge has to become available to us all to attain individual and collective progress. Social progress. All this, never forgetting that feelings of love and friendship are living inside of us all, leading us to oneness within a common ground of understanding and comprehension. This understanding is the only way to use our psychology and socialize in a constructive way. The Diary of Thoughts Part 10. Psychology, Sociology, and Relationships. Written by Carlos Pacheco, www.diaryofthoughts.com.